Sean Vetter is a DEA agent who takes his job very seriously. Right now, he's in Tijuana, ready to bust a Mexican cartel. His best friend, Hicks, is also part of the operation, and their supervisor is a man named Frost. Inside the building, there's a party going on. The host is Memo Lucero, a Colombian drug lord who made heaps of money from a pipeline in the States. But Judgment Day is coming. The agents crash the party in a chaos of smoke and gunshots. As the cartel goons begin to fire back, Lucero's bodyguard takes him through the back corridors. And Sean is the only one to notice their main target is gone. So he goes after them, emerging from the exit just in time to see them hijacking a taxi. Luckily, the traffic is chaotic at that point, so Sean is able to outrun the vehicle. Lucero tells Sean he's making a mistake. Things can get even worse if he goes down. When Hicks arrives, they arrest the man together and then celebrate the 7-year spell they've just broken. Frost is very proud of them. At home, Sean's wife Stacy is making candles when he calls. He says he'll still be gone for a day or two and apologizes for such a long absence. It's all just a prank though. He's standing outside and watching her like some romantic version of Ghostface. She's delighted to see him back sooner than expected and runs right into his arms. 2 months later, a spokesman for the DEA is speaking at the LA headquarters. He says that the Pacific Corridor took a big hit with the arrest of Memo Lucero. The head of the dragon has been cut off, and things will finally be different. Meanwhile, in Mexicali, we can see this is not true at all. A man who calls himself Diablo is mercilessly taking over all of Lucero's operations. And bad news travels fast, even into a federal penitentiary. A guard hands Lucero a newspaper, and there's a cell phone wrapped in it. Lucero makes a call to Raymond, one of his men back home. Raymond tells him the situation with Diablo is getting out of control. No one knows much about this guy. Not interested in those excuses, Lucero is furious to hear such news. When he's paying him a fortune to protect the business, he wants to talk to his cousin, Mateo. So Raymond puts the guy on the phone. Mateo promises Lucero to keep their family safe. Luckily for Mateo, Raymond is not a relative because he's soon targeted by a seemingly nice woman at a public square. It seems like Diablo is cleaning things up. At Sean's, his friends are having a party to celebrate his 100th bust with a particularly hideous cake. Frost gets a call and then comes to tell the news to Sean and Hicks. It's about Raymond's murder, but the boys don't want to hear about any of that at a party. The last guest to arrive is Big Sexy, an old friend from their thug life days. Frost has a quick look of disapproval, but Stacy tells him to relax. Hicks and Big Sexy start to tease Sean and mock him for being such a well-trained husband. They see he'll always do whatever Stacy tells him to. So Sean calls Hicks' wife Candace to join the debate, and his attitude changes real fast.
Wait, hold on, what are you guys talking about?
Their little daughter also shows up, and she has a serious DEA vibe already. Watching them play, Stacy finds it adorable that Sean is so good with kids. By sunset, Sean has already kicked out all of the guests for some private quality time with the missus. That same night, when the happy couple is asleep, a masked man comes to their door and opens fire through the glass window. Both of them get hit, but Sean is still able to chase the intruder and take him down. Then he goes back inside to check on Stacy, and it doesn't look good at all. He calls 911 but passes out before help arrives. He wakes up in the hospital several days later and gets desperate to find out that Stacy has already been buried. When he recovers, Hicks drives him to the cemetery so he can visit her grave. And then there is someone else he needs to see. The warden says Memo Lucero is extremely dangerous and has nothing to lose. Sean doesn't care because he's in a similar situation now. He just wants 5 minutes with the man. But Lucero doesn't want to talk and just keeps reading his book. Sean mentions the family pictures on the wall as a subtle threat, asking if he was the one who ordered the hit on him. All Lucero says is that if he wanted him dead, he would be. Sean knows that the order came from high up, but the one way to get a name is to start from the bottom. So he goes to see Big Sexy with Hicks. They ask him who are the people hooked up with the new distribution network. He agrees to guide them through the area. At night, we finally get to meet a tough fellow, Capone the dog. The proud owner of the best nose in town sniffs the trunks of every parked car in that block. Big Sexy knows he found something when he starts to bark and strikes a pose. An angry old lady comes out of a house to complain when she sees the car being towed. Hicks intervenes with the badge and tells Big Sexy to pop up the trunk. The lady looks inside and quickly takes it all back, not wanting to get involved in that kind of stuff. That car belongs to a man named Monroe, but everyone calls him Overdose. She shows them where his house is. Hicks and Sean tell Big Sexy he can't come with them at this point. They circle the house to the front porch and kick the door open. The place is a complete mess and they find 3 bodies in different rooms. Suddenly, someone on the upper floor begins to shoot through the ceiling and tells them to go away. Hicks goes up to the attic to have a talk with Monroe, convincing him to come down and explain what happened there. Monroe Overdose says things are tough since the big man got arrested. The new guys are pushing up the price and won't take no for an answer. He was lucky to be in the attic when they arrived, and he's been hiding there since they left. When Hicks asks for a name, he shuts down and says he'll take jail time over retaliation from those people. 3 rounds of Russian roulette are enough to change his mind. He says his contact goes by the name of Hollywood Jack. Looking at Monroe's pager, Frost says he received several calls from a fancy tanning salon. On the next day, Hicks and Sean head to Beverly Hills. As soon as Hollywood Jack arrives at the Soleil Salon in a Porsche, they can tell it's him, and he can tell they're cops right away. So Sean goes up there and asks for his license and registration. He says this is about the missing mud flaps, and Hollywood Jack has a fit. We can see no one has ever taught him anything remotely similar to manners. Sean asks about Monroe Overdose, and Jack is shocked that someone would have that name. Then he asks about those calls from the salon. Jack tells him to call his lawyer and stop bothering him. Sean lands a punch right in the middle of his face and says he'll do the same to his lawyer when he arrives. Hicks can see it's time to step in. Right after this fun chat, Jack stops by a friend's house. He invites himself in and asks for a beer. Then he tells him about his earlier conversation with Sean, expressing surprise that Agent Vetter is still alive. Meanwhile, in Mexico, Memo's family are taking a non-optional holiday. Teresa is not happy, but Mateo tells her these are Memo's direct orders. They're supposed to go somewhere safer for now. It would also be a good idea to get there in an equally safe car, but it seems nobody thought of that. Mateo then calls Memo asking for forgiveness. He couldn't protect his family. Now, Memo is ready to talk to Sean. They meet at the penitentiary chapel. Memo starts off with childhood stories about hardship and poverty. Sean obviously starts to walk away. Ain't nobody got time for that. But then Memo says his own wife was a victim of the same person who took Stacy's life. That's why he wants to help now. He says this Diablo dude is probably rebuilding the entire operation and he must be looking for buyers. Memo slides a Bible to Sean with a piece of paper for the bookmark and says he should set up a trap. From church, we go directly to the nightclub. Sean is sitting with a man named Joe who's been doing business with Diablo. Pretending to be a potential buyer, Sean gets the man to talk. They negotiate a price and Joe gives him the coordinates for the delivery. All that is left to do is talk the boss into lending the cash. Sean gives the other agents a presentation about Diablo, and he seems very impatient at the lack of commitment to the mission. This is not just his personal revenge, it's their chance to shut them down before they become the next dominant cartel. Come Friday, and the whole thing is a disaster. One of Joe's men talks too much and ends up mentioning Stacy's death. Losing it completely, Sean assaults the man and blows his own cover. A police officer turns up, but his behavior is very strange. Instead of rushing to break up an ugly fight, he just takes his time and kinda looks around to check if anyone's looking. Then he pulls his gun and Hicks takes him down. That's when Joe is sure this is a setup. Out of the blue, lots of people start to pop out of character and point guns at each other. The whole thing looks like a musical directed by Tarantino. By the time they're all done, the place looks like a battlefield. Later that day, Frost wants to see Sean. He seems very sad about the situation, and he also misses Stacy very much. But they have lost 3 agents because Sean was unable to control his emotions, so he must take his badge now. Sean will be suspended for 6 months.
I grieve every day.
Hicks arrives right when he's leaving and gets shocked to see his badge on Frost's desk. With no one else to turn to, Sean goes to see Memo Lucero again. He's the only one who sees the bright side of his suspension. Until now, he was just a little cop going up against a huge monster. Now, he's free to become a monster as well. That's what you get when you seek advice from a drug lord. Sean even starts to open up a little about his wife. He says he met Stacy when they were just teens, and she was everything to him. Normally, the other person would tell him that revenge won't bring her back. But again, the other person here is Memo Lucero. So he just goes on with the instructions and tells Sean to follow the money all the way to Mexico. He also says he's not safe there, and asks him to get him transferred. Following those instructions, Sean finds Joe at another nightclub, this one with the genius name Tequila Gorilla. Comes up with a plan and goes to get Hicks, but that doesn't go as well as he expects. Hicks says they shouldn't get involved and he must leave this to Frost now. Candace shows up briefly at the door and Sean can see he is no longer welcome there. Hicks explains this is about their daughter, Rachel. Since they visited Sean at the hospital, she has been having nightmares and asking if Daddy is next. Hicks says they're supposed to be the law now and not some street gang that takes matters into their own hands. Sean gets very upset and asks him to imagine what he'd do himself if Candace bit the dust. Big Sexy has a very different attitude towards the vigilante dilemma. He says Sean can count on him 100%, especially because Stacy was like his family too. Besides, he seems to have some new stuff to test out. Hicks ends up showing up after all. He wouldn't let this best friend be that stupid all by himself. So into the club they go. Big Sexy's test seems to be successful, since that gun pretty much destroys everything in sight. He fires at everything before asking people to get down, and the other two keep shooting at bottles for a dramatic effect. Once they get Joe, they make him call Hollywood Jack and set up a meeting. In the morning, Joe is waiting by his car in the middle of nowhere. Soon we see Hollywood Jack flying his plane to the same location. He comes out of it in his usual mood, making fun of Joe's look while he walks to the back of the truck. But when he gets the door open, Sean and Hicks pop out. They tell Joe his services are no longer needed and then start to work on Jack. They tell him he must take them to Diablo. Jack simply laughs at the idea. They are nothing but a pair of poor cops. What makes them think they're scarier than someone like Diablo? But a few minutes later, he's standing inside his own grave while Hicks throws more dirt. Nothing like a little perspective. He says he has never seen or talked to Diablo himself, but he can fly them to his meeting point with Diablo's people. And that's what they do. After loading the plane with all the money, after they cross the border, Hicks tells him to make sure he'll keep his normal personality shining through. Those guys can't suspect anything different. When they land in Mexico, Jack does his best to sound like his normal self, but Diablo's goons can smell something funny. Maybe because his face is not at all its normal self. Anyway, as soon as he tosses the money bags, they just take him down right there. They put all the money into the black vans and drive off. Sean and Hicks get off the plane as soon as they leave. Hotwiring a random car, they follow the black vans to that same place where Memo had a party so long ago. That means Sean knows a secret way in. He tells Hicks they must meet there if they get separated. Once inside, they soon hear some hushed voices speaking in Spanish. While Hicks stays at the surveillance room, Sean tiptoes further into the building. He finds Mateo sitting alone in a room and he knows this is Diablo. His men quickly come to restrain the intruder. Mateo's not ashamed at the whole backstabbing within the cartel family at all, but he says he never ordered the hit on him. Hicks picks up some dangerous movement on the cameras, so he opens fire. That distracts Mateo's men enough for Sean to break free. He goes after Mateo and they both get badly hurt in the chase. But while Sean stumbles his way back to Hicks outside, Mateo doesn't make it. Back in the States, we find out that Memo Lucero's transfer was actually into freedom. A group of armed men attacked the vehicle that was transporting him to the other facility and he escaped. On the phone with Hicks, Sean says he signed the transfer himself. He says he feels bad, but he's now ready to take Frost's advice and just get some rest in a calm place until he's fully recovered. Of course, that's a lie, and he's actually in Mexico. And so is Memo, mourning the loss of his dear wife, with the help of two pretty ladies. He sees Sean and invites him to take a seat. He says he has no reason to fear for his life because Sean had to be crazy to try anything in his territory. Then Sean says that if he wanted Memo dead, he would be. He puts the handcuffs on the table and slowly walks away, while some of the people around them reveal themselves as police officers. The restaurant is turned upside down as we hear helicopters approaching. And this is the end. This was a recap of the 2003 movie A Man Apart by TSG New Line Cinema, starring Vin Diesel and Lorenz Tate. If you were Sean, what would you have done differently? Let us know in the comments below with #CinemaRecap. Until next time.